Welcome back to the show, guys. In today's episode, we have some chat about wheel depth at Nationals, a whole deep dive, actually, into Nationals. Our fellow YouTubers are announcing their sponsors this year. Is that a good thing? A post-event existential crisis? And is your Garmin suggested training a joke, or is it making you fitter? All right, let's get into it. All right, the Aussie Nationals road race happened over the weekend. Luke Plapp won on Sunday, and he did so, right? He did so running some 30 mil wheels. Now, last year he ran 60s.
Yep.
Luke doesn't do anything by chance. Like, having dealt a little bit with him in the past, he's meticulous. This guy, when we raced a little bit with him, like way back when, he was running wax chains before, like, we thought they were for candles, right? What's going on here, do you think? Have you got any theories on it? You were in the race yourself.
I love it. I personally love it. Go back to the Charlotte Rims. I ran similar depth wheels. I bought new wheels for the race, the Windspace Hyper 35s, and ran those. I think it's come back around.
Yeah.
So back in the day, we would run the lightest wheels we could. Like the box section alloys, like the Fulcrum Racing Zeros was like, if you could get a set of them, you were happy because they felt really good. Then we've gone through the aero era where everyone just wanted deeper wheels, particularly because people would say, oh, I've run this wheel set through a sort of a calculator that told me it would be 5 seconds quicker up a climb because I'm going 25k an hour, or I've used best bike split and it's calculated it to be that, right? That was kind of novice level measurement of speed. Now I think we're coming around and we're starting to realize that it's not just the calculated speed that is the only factor. So I think he's run, now for those that don't know, the Nationals course, it's 16 laps of about a 20-minute loop, and there's a 6-minute climb in it, which averages about 6%. So its average speed of the race is about 38 kilometers an hour. So as a whole, the race is kind of borderline between you want to run your aero wheels for like the flat and the downhills. Then you also got to get yourself up the climb. So you don't necessarily want the extra weight and resistance from that. So Plappy running the 35 mils, I think comes down to one thing that can't be measured, which is acceleration.
Mm-hmm.
Acceleration out of the corners. Because we all know, when you're going 28k an hour, an aero section wheel is going to be faster, but it's that kicking out of the corners, which I think is the reason why we're starting to come back around.
I think it potentially leans a little bit into his race tactics as well, which was to follow. Like at no point really was his tactic to go on the attack and be super aggressive and be out solo off the front, where you would therefore be using the aero gains. His tactic was clearly to try and follow as much as possible. What do you need to be able to follow? You need acceleration. It's funny you kind of mentioned the acceleration thing, because like that's totally playing on my mind all the time with that mosaic stuff that we put up about, like, is there something in that I'm missing in those discussions, which maybe we'll get onto later on today in the show. But yeah, I kind of feel like you could be onto something, that we're going full circle, because I reckon there are guys, and yes, I'm not sure, is this officially my title that I'm allowed to use now, but the COVID babies, I reckon there's a whole group of them, right, who have never run anything less than a 50 mil wheel.
Mm-hmm.
And they haven't experienced the joy, as you said, the Fulcrum Racing Zero, right? They haven't experienced the joy of that 2 or 3 pedal strokes, whoop.
The person that only runs 60s, I reckon would think I'm mad for running 30 mil deep wheels. They'd go, oh, but you're averaging 38k an hour. You'll be way faster with a set of 60 mils. They're way more aero. But until you've ridden a set of 30s, you can't appreciate the feeling of the bike, especially when you get out of the saddle and ride, that it works. The other thing as well, let me explain this, right? Because I got the Vision Metron 55s. They're my normal racing wheel set. On paper, if I was doing a time trial around the course, they would definitely be faster than the 30 mils. But here's the thing, right? Even if I save, there's a few things to this. Firstly, on the flat sections in the downhill set, you got to take into account how you're actually riding the race, because we're not doing time trials. So it's all I'm going to say, oh, well, they save 3 to 5 watts on the flat and the downhill sections. But if I ride a good race, I'm in the draft every downhill section and every flat section, in which case the aerodynamics is meaningless because I'm drafting anyway. So there's that. And I would say, if I do happen to be on the front for some reason, riding
like
on
the top of the first lap.
Yes.
But we won't talk about that.
Riding on the flat for a certain section, for me, right, with a threshold of 400 watts, the metabolic sort of cost, the energy cost of doing 300 watts versus 305 watts doesn't really make a difference. It's kind of much of a muchness. If I do happen to be riding on the front, which if I'm smart, I'm not doing. But what does make a lot of a difference is let's say a 3 watt saving, because that wind space wheel set versus the Visions saved me 550 grams from the entire weight of my bike.
Wow.
Yeah, quite a lot, right? Yeah. Let's say that saves me 3 to 5 watts on the steep section of the climb. When I'm doing that at 480 watts, when I'm on the limit, 5 watts there is literally the difference between me blowing up and me being able to stick with the group. And that's where I feel like we're starting to come around and people are almost getting like maybe 5 years ago, the real switched on people were like, oh, you're more aero, so you go faster. And that was sort of like, you were kind of ahead of your time. But now we've gone almost over that. And it's like, okay, we understand aerodynamics, but now you've got to take into account the race situation and the other things, in which case maybe you're coming back to the shallower wheel. And then the other thing as well, as I was saying, coming out of the course, that acceleration, every time you have to get yourself up to speed, it's also not measurable. That's the other thing. I mean, you can measure aerodynamics and say you save 5 watts. How do you calculate all the energy savings from the savings in watts when you're accelerating back up to speed with a lighter wheel set? Yeah. As far as I'm aware, there's no way to calculate that.
I don't know whether you want to bring this up now, but so one of those recent videos from Peak Talk, and he was talking a little about the aerodynamics of the rim brake versus the disc brake bikes, and that there was just no measurable difference between them. The one thing he did stress was that one of the biggest differences you could find, apart from the rider, obviously, is the marriage between the tire and the rim. And to get that right, that frontal area of that particular part of, or that accessory, that component, is a bigger key to the actual depth of your wheel.
Definitely. I mean, a while ago, those Mavic wheels came out that had a little strip that you installed to smooth that out. So yeah, it's a good point. If you're kind of going back and forth, should I ride a 30 mil or a 50 mil? Actually, what you should probably be looking at, if you actually care about aerodynamics, is getting the right width and brand tire that works well for the rim. And you're probably saving more watts than the rim difference anyway. So
before we go completely off topic, because I do want to try and keep this sort of nationals-ish, and then we might talk about some components later on, so obviously you were in the race, you had a good ride, you finished, which is extraordinary. For those of you who don't know the Australian Nationals course, it's just horrific, and normally sort of 10, 20 guys finish out of like 200, and Jesse did. So that's amazing. Did you see, my question was though, did you see anything particularly from the elites or from the pros as such that you kind of went, oh?
A couple of things. Geez, they use a lot of caffeine. A lot of, like, I had two beta fuel caffeine gels, which have 200 milligrams each in them. And I was planning to use them in the second half of the race. And I got an hour, I was like hour and a half into the race. And I was like, I need the caffeine early. Like I really need it. So that was probably my mistake. But like, go through the feed zone an hour in, and guys would like sort of lift their jersey to dump their rubbish. And like caffeine, the little caffeine bottles, like 5-hour energy shots. The caffeine shots were coming out.
Yeah.
Oh, we've just started. Like we've literally just started. And I was like, oh, yeah, interesting to see that. And I was like, oh, like, yeah, I guess if you really are using caffeine to get everything out of yourself, you're pumping it from the start, and you're probably taking way more than just your 1 or 2 gels for a little boost. I mean, they really won't hold back, the pros. They'll just take what they need to get over. So that was pretty interesting. Cooling wise, a very hot race, and unique that because it's loops about every 15 to 20 minutes you're going through there, so you get a chance to go through the feed zone. Interesting seeing Luke Plapp had I think he must have had 4 or 5 people in the feed zone giving him stuff. But every lap he'd go through, he'd have an ice cold bottle of water, and a plastic bottle, and he'd dump it all over himself. So essentially, the entire race, he was covered in water. He was soaking wet.
Yep.
And a couple of those laps, I was going up there looking at him, just pouring this cold water on himself, and I was like, I wish I had that. Like, I planned well. Like, I had it all planned out, but you go to a race and you just go, oh, there's something I didn't think of.
Yeah.
And it's kind of frustrating when there's obviously, I can't really complain. There's probably people that were way less prepared than me, but yeah, they just, especially Plappy's probably a unique individual. Jay's probably similar.
Planned.
They just stuff I didn't think of, which was interesting. And then I guess the talent is obviously crazy. I think one of the best rides I'd have to say is actually Caleb Ewan. For a guy who only got back to Australia, I think maybe before he was doing Heffrons, that was maybe a month and a half ago. Did a couple of Heffrons. I've just been riding a lot. He was up in Sunshine Coast. And then he's like riding away from me up the climb as a sprinter. He's obviously can climb. He's got some climbing results like up the Poggio and Milan San Remo and stuff. But it's just really impressive seeing pros who this isn't even their target race.
I don't know how to frame this question. I don't know if it's a question or a statement, right? But like, I wonder whether we give professional cyclists enough credit for how good an athlete they are, all right? And the reason I ask that is because, okay, the common thing is that you hear is like, oh, he's a pro, and then the next thing is, well, he's paid to ride his bike type thing. So therefore, he's going to be good because quite simply, she has had time. Like, it's just a pure time thing. You're just spending time on the bike, and that's going to equate to your ability on the bike. But I kind of feel like that undervalues a lot of the time the actual talent of these people. Like, not taking anything away from you, but you could train as much. You could do the exact training. Maybe you did do more training than some of the guys in that race, but you're never going to be as good as them, no matter what. And it's like, that's because they're the 0.001% of athletic capacity, the ability to metabolize the nutrition that's being put into them and adapt to the training and that kind of thing. Does that sort of question / statement make sense?
I mean, it rings true for me. I think people kind of might ask me, oh, you still got goals to go pro, and I'm like, it's almost rude to a pro to ask me that. Like, you don't understand how good they are, and not just good because they train hard, but good because of how talented they are. And it's always shocking when you race them, how good they are. And now, it's not all. Some of it's physical. Some of it's also they are so incredibly good at positioning that they're not wasting that 10 watts through the uni section that you are. And all that stuff adds up. But yeah, they're just every time I do a race with pros, you realize they're another cut above.
Right. So this year, Jesse, I think we're in store for now. Potentially close your ears here, but I think we're in store for almost a $20,000 Specialized SL8, right? And look, it's a crazy number. Whatever. There's videos out there. The Road CC one talking about the price increase, etc. We talked about expensive bikes the other week. We're not going to go that route. There seems to be this thing that exists with Specialized specifically, and we've heard it a bit on other podcasts, other media and we just in general chat, right? That people are like, oh, but it's such a good bike, But it's. I had this exact chat on the weekend, Dan Forsyth with you on the hill, and I had this thing. I was like, it's going to be 30 grand Australian. He's like, but it's going to be a good bike. Okay, can you help me, Jesse?
I don't know if I'm going to be much help because my thoughts are like scattered. There's nothing coherent here. The first thing, Road CC did a fantastic video that charted inflation and then what the expected price of the top of the range bikes would be and what they actually are. And the price increases are astronomical, as everyone knows, but they did a great job of sort of breaking that down and pointing that out, which I liked. So what do I think about this?
But it's such a good bike, Jesse. I'm willing to pay for it. It's such a good bike.
Here's where we're starting to get, I feel like we're getting some clarity. Okay. There's the mate that says it's such a good bike. Okay. Then we've got guys, which we've already brought up so many times, like Hambini and Peak Talk and stuff, that actually go out and test the stuff. Sorry. So you've got the mate that says it's a good bike. You've got the marketing material of the brands, which say it's so and so much better. And you're like, you really want to believe it. And then you go out and people that do test it, inevitably on pretty much everything they test is, much of a muchness. Couple of watts there. It's pretty much just how wide your handlebars are. It's pretty much what they say, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing you've got is Chris Miller, who goes and finds a titanium bike and does pretty unscientific but real world testing on it and goes, it's pretty much as fast as my Factor.
And I'm going to race it.
Yep. And raced it at Masters Nationals, and it was pretty good, fine. Are we close to a day where you go on a group ride and someone's riding the SL8 and they'd go, yeah, it's pretty much as good as any other bike? Like, I think we're almost at a point where you can't get away with what you're hearing from a mate.
Pretty much. I mean, okay, I'm not going to. Let's not go too far back down this rabbit hole. But yeah, I did a bike ride in Sydney last night that is a Paceline type thing, and we could have literally had Cervelo S5s versus everyone else. Right? We could have just had that race, and it would have been pretty much 50-50. And you can't tell me that's about great local dealers or Jumbo Visma. That's the so and so said that's a great bike. That's a great bike. It's clearly got to that phase, I think.
Maybe it doesn't help because I said it was a great bike a couple of weeks ago.
Influencer. There you go.
Yeah. No, well, I just that I've fallen down the.
Yeah, I don't know, Jesse, but look, as far as the titanium bike goes, I'm going to keep trying to test it and test all kinds of bits and pieces. So let us know down below if you want to see some more of that stuff. But yeah, we're gonna carry on with it.
I was going to get a bit personal with it, actually. So the post-event existential crisis, I'm going to call it. I think everyone's experienced it. You go and do your target race, your A event, whatever that may be. Might be your local Fondo, could be Nationals, which we just had. And the 2 or 3 days after it are so bad. They're really horrible, where you just question everything. It's really hard to get through. So, I mean, I'll get... This might be a bit TMI, but I'll go into it. I don't mind. So I finished Nationals. Now, there's the obvious things you start questioning, which is, maybe I should have done that in training, or should have done that, or tried this nutritional thing. So that's always a particularly unhealthy, healthy in a sense, because you need to reflect on things, but also the things your brain thinks of 2 days after an event, most of the time not logical. So I'd recommend a lot of those things, write them down somewhere and assess them a week later once you can do them with a fresh brain. But as well, you start going like, what am I doing with my life? And which seems weird because all you've done is a bike race, which is pretty insignificant. But at least for me, I find, you start really reflecting on stuff. So like, for example, I have the training I did in the sort of 3 months before Nationals was a lot. And now, because I've done there was only 10 domestic riders, non-pros that finished Nationals. I was one. So now I'm like, I'm really up there domestically. Like, should I press on and race more this year? Like, that's just where my brain has gone. But then, and the thing as well, like with my work, I have my work set up with my coaching. How do I get into this?
This is good. I got heaps of questions for you in this, actually.
All right. Okay. Yeah. Let me try and. I want to go into it. Yeah. So, The only thing is, like, to do that, I would have to keep my work at a certain level, which it has been at. I guess I've set myself up in a way where I can work and live and still have enough time and flexibility to train a lot. So the idea was, just do nationals, your one last thing while you do it, and then just, focus back, keep growing the coaching and do that sort of in 2023. Because I have room to do that if I wanted, and focus on that. But now I'm like, maybe I should just keep my coaching at the same commitment I'm doing now and not grow it, and just keep riding and train more. And now I'm going through all these like things which are not good. Like, nothing I'm really thinking in my head is logical because it's all off the back of a race. But I think most people, maybe not to the degree I am, because riding is such a large chunk of my life.
So
brutal.
Was there a moment where you stepped back and enjoyed your result? Because it was a really good result. Have you spent any time sort of reflecting on just the pure positives of that?
Not really. I enjoyed the physical shape I was in while I was training, so I kind of enjoyed it then. But while I was doing that, it was actually the opposite. I was actually looking forward to thinking ahead to 2023 and being like, okay, once I do this, I'll cut the riding back. I'll focus more on my business, and I'll put my time and energy into that, and I'll grow that because that's what I want to do. But then now you kind of get there and you're like, actually, I raced well. Maybe I should keep that going.
I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth or anything, but that particular event as well, because the goalposts are so difficult in the sense that you probably went into that race knowing you weren't going to win. Okay. There's a percent chance that you might have won the race, but you would know yourself that that's a very, very small chance, and similar-ish enough for a podium. So outside that, the goals become kind of like quite difficult to sort of just nail down in that race, because that race can play out lots of different ways. So I wonder whether that's played a little bit into you, because immediately you're sort of going, well, I was so close to that next step and that next step. So it's kind of hard for you to just say, well, I failed or I succeeded. There's no sort of obvious kind of path for you there. The other thing I was going to mention is, you spent the whole drive or the last couple of weeks talking about like, you're just going to blow out. You can't wait to blow out and all that kind of stuff. And I sort of felt like after the event, you kind of were just almost going through the motions of blowing out. You're like, I suppose I talked about blowing out, so I suppose I will if I have to.
That's it. So that's it. It's because like events, not just nationals, but any event is such like a bubble, and this saying has come up so much recently, but it's like it's a storm in a teacup, I think is the saying, where you're so focused on this thing, and then you kind of lose all perspective after it. And it's really hard to get back into, it's almost like it's like a little post-event depression. You kind of go back to your regular life. And it's hard to get through that period after.
What about the fact that you're super fit right now? You've achieved a level of fitness that, as you said, was probably the highlight of the whole experience for you, was just how fit you got. Is there a part of you that's kind of like, it'd be a real shame to waste this? But
it's toxic. It's totally toxic. Because to the degree that I'm thinking about it, it is, because I've got so many other things that I could achieve and focus on and spend my energy. It's not just time. It's not just time as well, because it's energy.
It is.
Like time, what's time? I could get up at 5 a.m. and ride. Like, it's not just time. It's just it's energy as well. And while for like the last 8 weeks of training, all I was looking forward to was not training and just enjoying my, doing something, focusing on something, putting that energy, my sort of excess energy, into something different. And now I kind of get there and my brain is like done a flip on itself and just wants to keep doing the same thing. And it's very hard to make decisions in the post-race, fuzz.
Yep.
brain fuzz. I do feel like for me mentally, I'm gonna have to go a bit cold turkey with it, and you know, when you're sitting at 145 CTL, I need to get that needs to get under 100 just for my own mental, you know, sanity.
Nationals 2024. Get that up to 200. 200 CTL. Start planning.
Yeah.
You and Trekkie now. Build. Build. All right. Anything else? That was really good. Appreciate you sharing that. Obviously, guys, let us know if you've had similar experience post-event. Any ideas for Jesse, what he should get into? Any other hobbies? I suggested, what did I suggest? Sailing?
So I'm going to do what I said I would do when I was training, which is take all that excess time and energy that I spent riding and work more on my business and do that. How long have you been on YouTube for, Chris?
So I started the channel after the tap, so 6 or 7 years, I think. Yeah.
Quite a long time. Do you have any YouTube mistakes, things you regret?
Yes.
Do you care to enlighten? I've got one, but I want to hear yours first. What are your regrets? And we're gonna go down a bit of a rabbit hole with this one, but yeah, anything you take back?
Yeah, I'm going to start. So we might do a few to and fro's here, right? This might be a regular segment for you, mate. So I've got a few. So firstly, definitely, and too much family on the channel to start with. Too much of the kids, too much of Elizabeth, and not for the obvious reason, not for the reason that people sort of talk about, which is you don't want to show them your family or any of that kind of stuff. It's actually not that. It's because what happens, and at the time when I was including the family in what I was doing on the channel, it was very much daily vlog type stuff, okay? And so what would happen, right, is I would be constantly in a family situation and monitoring whether that was worthy of filming. Like, should I be filming Catherine doing something at that particular time because it might fit the narrative of the daily vlog that particular day? So there's that element to it. And the other part was that so it was really bad for my relationship, because what would happen is, you know, you might be having a domestic, well, not argument, but in a domestic situation, right? But then you knew you had to film something, you wanted to film something, so you would switch on sort of Vlog Chris for that thing. And so, you know, then like you could have a situation where like, oh, you're only just nice to the camera and stuff like that. So it just, as a general rule, yeah, it's just not nice, and you won't really see me do too much of it.
I've got one, which is actually relates to another YouTuber. When I first started making videos, I did quite a few. What I would do is I would see a video on YouTube in the cycling space that I didn't agree with, and then I would make a reaction video and explain why I didn't agree. And I did one on a video Cam Nichols did, but it was an old video he did that was sort of his personal experience with what he was eating, and I did a reaction video to it, which I kind of still stand by what I said in the video. I just regret that I ever did it, because I was sort of friends with Cam. I'd done a bit of work for him, and then I kind of did this video on him, which in hindsight, I just shouldn't have done. And the reason why I kind of brought this up as a topic is he did not hold a grudge for that. And it was there's very few people I know that would just build a bridge and get over it. And I just have a lot of respect for him for that.
That's
so I
cool.
made a video of him,
Yep.
and I've been in touch with him recently. He's been in touch with me for a couple of things, and I said, you know, like, nice to be in touch after you know the video I did, which I wasn't proud of. He said, yeah, water under the bridge, it's all good. So
sick.
Yeah, just shout out to Cam. I think it's very easy to get petty with those sorts of things, but he was more mature. Yeah.
All right, I got one more while we're sharing. So yeah, the GCN should be cancelled thing. Okay, so yeah, completely. Okay, I want to say two things on this. I do regret it, and I regret it because I don't like the title that we had for the video, which was "Should be GCN be cancelled," right? And because I think that was certainly the wrong language given the current climate of that word and how it certainly plays out in the US, right? And on top of that, I think the content the actual the quote that I made in that video was, it's like watching Play School, which I stand by, right? 100% stand by. It's like watching Play School. I watched it again before coming here today to back myself up. And it is like watching Play School, but Play School exists for a reason. Play School's there for young kids, for beginners, for it's afternoon TV, it's fluff. That's fine. It exists. That's cool. I got no issue with that. So GCN is like watching Play School, but it shouldn't be cancelled, I think. And that's really all I want to say.
Do you think, though, like the cycling space on YouTube is kind of boring? There used to be kind of, maybe saying this on the back of regrets isn't the right time to say it, but there used to be good, some good entertainment on YouTube. People, there was like, remember the Phil Guyman Durian Rider sort of feud was kind of entertaining. And there's a lot of that in other sort of spaces. But it seems like in cycling now, everyone just stays in their sort of silo. And there's just not much.
Do you have a theory on why that is? Because I do.
I don't really. What are we thinking?
Well, as a couple of people at a Z grade level who have tried to do a little bit of, topical, hey, here's our opinion, there's a backlash. And it's pretty like in your face, the backlash. And so your immediate reaction is to just step back and go, not going to do that again. So I'll bring up the topic and I'll say, this is a controversial subject, but I'm not going to say this is right and this is wrong. Or, sorry, GCN, I just said you were great. Or you do a video about hot topics and hot takes and talk about whether bar bags are good or not. Like, okay, that's not really a hot topic.
See, even this chat, people will think is negative. Because we're sharing an opinion with something.
Being too negative.
But no, but I'm going to say it anyway. But what is the value in a piece of opinion-based content if all you're doing is bringing up a topic or bringing up what an opinion could be, but not actually giving your opinion?
We said that Trek bikes were dead, right? Probably another regret. Okay. And so by saying that or making the comment that, we think the brand's underselling at the moment, you're going to piss off Trek people. And they were pissed off. And they told us how pissed off they were.
The sad thing about the whole opinion thing is if you want opinions on stuff, the places you have to go to find it are really obscure. Like you got to go on a Reddit, subreddit, and read comments to actually get like people's opinions on stuff, or a Facebook comment thread, or reacting to an article on something. It's just a shame that there isn't more opinions out there. I personally think it's a shame because I like reading opinion-based stuff.
Let us know down below. So what is the balance here? Are we just being negative by sharing our opinion on these topics? Have you found somewhere else on YouTube that is opinionated and will actually have these discussions? So let us know down below. We'd really like to hear your thoughts on it.
Bit random. Did you see INEOS are sponsored by SunGod Sunnies this year?
Only reason is because I saw Geraint Thomas can't run his poor jawbreakers anymore, but yeah.
Don't you reckon that's totally random?
Yeah.
I thought SunGod was just some cheap internet Sunnies brand. Like a couple of the Aussie domestic teams run them, and I didn't really have I had nothing against them, but I just didn't really have any respect for them. They just look like one of those brands that pop up and that sort of thing. And then I saw INEOS are wearing them. Like, wouldn't that cost a lot of money to sponsor INEOS?
You would have thought. I don't know. I mean, look, the INEOS budget clearly is not under pressure. But what I would say is this, that there would have been a time back, when INEOS were just putting lightweights on their bike and saying, stuff you, Shimano, we're INEOS, we're going to put lightweights on because they're the best going around, right? There would have been a time when INEOS would just go, we don't care how much you're going to give us, whatever your sunglass sponsorship is, we're going to run Oakleys because they're the best. Now, as we all know, they're not the best. Arbor Optics are the best. But there would have been. And all their riders would have been, no, we want to stick on Oakley because we're used to them, we love them, blah, blah, blah. So I don't know. The only reason I say that is like, I wonder whether under it all there is a little bit of a, maybe we do need to just top up the budget a bit because UAE have got this and Jumbo have done that going on. Because like you said, like it's a bit of a random brand.
How much would
for
they
them.
be giving them?
Well,
Like I
yeah.
was on their Instagram, right? Because I'm like, they're not that big a brand. 153,000 followers on Instagram. The reason I didn't really give them any legitimacy is they've got like no engagement. Their photos will get like 300 likes, 274. But then they sponsor INEOS. And they also sponsor Formula One. What's his name? I think Daniel Ricciardo wears them.
What it?
And the McLaren team.
All right.
Yeah, here he is. A photo of Daniel Ricciardo wearing your sunnies on your Instagram account, and it's got 166 likes. What? Like
Branding is weird.
What is going on here?
Branding is very weird. I don't know. I don't know what's going on.
Any
there.
ideas? Maybe someone that watches will have some like what and what's in it for INEOS? Like how much money would a sunglasses? I mean, it's great for SunGod.
God,
Like,
yeah.
They will sell like
I had literally never heard of them.
Yeah.
Never heard of them. And have no intention to hear of them really much ever again. Because, yeah, anyway. Sunglass fashion, just quietly. Can I just transform this into sunglass fashion?
go for it.
I reckon they're on the wrong route. I think we're going to go smaller. I reckon trends for 2022, 2023, we're going to go back to some sort of old school Lance M-frame style things. We're going to see, because, okay, the reason I say that is because you're seeing the aero helmets. There was a phase where aero helmets were like just the chunky ass, like that friggin' S-Works Evade thing at the moment, right? Which is, I'm sorry, horrendous. But you're starting to see aero helmets look stylish now. So, you know, the HJC one's pretty good. The Met helmet's pretty good. Like the
Abus one,
Abus one, yeah.
Can't get it in Australia, but looks good.
Yeah, looking good. So when they were full chunk ass, you had to run big sunnies to complete the look, because otherwise you just looked like you had this big, massive, like mushroom hat on and then tiny, tiny sunny spectacles. It didn't work, so you had to run big sunnies. Now, with more stylish, smaller lids, you can get away. It's back to the old days. You can get away with a lighter, thinner framed, thinner lensed sunglass. And that's going to be a good thing for everyone, because I'm sorry, like it's just like the sight of guys like Vincenzo Nibali and stuff running these big chunky sunnies. You're like, mate, that's not you.
It's the brand's fault. They pushed it too far. They went too big.
Too big.
And now it's flipped on its head. Even Jay with those big Psycon things. It's like, nah, come on. No good.
No, get the jawbreakers back on. Get them back on, Jay. That's the secret to success, as you know. Yeah, so there's your fashion tip. Those interested in Fashion Friday, it's small sunnies are back, all right? Small sunnies are back. Let us know your thoughts down below. Why are SunGod interested in INEOS? And will you be buying little sunnies in 2023? Okay.
Chris's Creators Corner.
No one has given me any better title or any intro music as yet. I don't know whether that's just a read between the lines situation. What's going on YouTube? Well, it's the beginning of a new year, Jesse, and what I have noticed amongst the YouTube cycling vlogging community is that many of the brethren are announcing their 2023 plans and their sponsorship agreements. Phil Guyman did I actually watched a full Phil Guyman video. I found it very interesting. He went through all his sponsors that he has brought on board for the year. He has talked about what they want from him, what he gets for them, all that kind of stuff. I was a big fan of it, actually.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
I need to watch
it was actually bloody good. A bit of a mind blowing to actually how well sort of integrated and assisted he is, but good on him, well played. So other guys doing it, just quickly, I'm going to read some of these. I know just Ed Laverick did it, Dylan Johnson's done it, and Alex Dorset has done it as well, just announcing their sort of plans, etc., etc. Playing a little devil's advocate here, is this bad for road cycling teams? Because, you know, ultimately then, you know, you've got brands then putting their money into these YouTube people or influencers, whatever you want to call them. That's money that could have gone into bike racing, into sort of amateur bike racing all over the place.
Yeah, it's probably bad for teams, but I think teams domestically have probably gotten away with murder a little bit, and have been on the gravy train in some cases a bit too long. So it is nice to see some of the individuals getting more support, because I just think they move the needle more for the brands. So it kind of makes sense.
Well, for a brand as much, it's a much smaller. I mean, hey, talking from first-hand experience, it's a much smaller, a much easier sell to a brand to support one person who's got one sort of outlet than, oh, give us 14 things and we'll hope to provide you some things around the country.
Here's the thing as well. A lot of the teams don't need the stuff.
Correct.
It's this weird smoke and mirrors thing where it's like, you're on, like, I'm not talking about World Tour, but sort of under World Tour. It's kind of like you have a team, you sign riders, and then to look good, you all have to have the same bike. But as individuals, a lot of those riders probably don't deserve to have the support of a brand and a bike.
Half the time they don't even want the bike.
They probably don't even want it. And the only reason maybe the only reason that it kind of went along for so long is because the brands weren't really sure where else to put their, it was just what you did. I mean, you support a team if you got a brand. Now it's not. I think it's a bit of a.
It's a vicious circle, isn't it? Because it's like the teams are trying to look pro, quote unquote, but everyone knows that they're not pro. But to get the riders that you want on the team, you've got to kind of have the look of the pro thing anyway. So then you're back to trying to look pro to get the right. So it's just this endless sort of loop that goes around that doesn't actually serve any purpose.
Prime example of why I prefer Wahoo over Garmin. You turn your Garmin on when we're in Ballarat, and on the home screen is suggested workout for the day. And it was a threshold session with 2x18 minutes, zone 4. Yep. Who in the history of cycling has just turned on their Garmin and followed a threshold session? Like, why would that exist? It blows my mind.
It's classic Garmin. It's just everything.
I thought you said they'd gotten rid of that stuff, because I was going on about how good it was because they had the solar panel, and you were like, oh yeah, they've cleaned their act up. That was a big lie.
So they've cleaned it up in the sense that you can turn all this off. Like you can turn all this you can? It's like, oh yeah, you can turn off all, there's this whole pro pacing strategy that you can use on it that tells you how fast you should, how much power you should put out at a particular moment to try and go as fast as you possibly can. There's high traffic warnings, there's sharp turn warnings, you name it, you can be bloody warned about it. And yeah, the suggested workout thing, it only seems to come in two suggestions. I'm either doing a threshold session or base training. That's basically all I'm doing. That's just all I'm doing. And a rest day. It's desperate for me to take a rest day. It's like, what are you doing to yourself? So yeah, it's there, it exists. I'm sorry. But hang on, you delved a little bit into the HRV world and kind of backed out of it during nationals. Like,
not as a coach, I backed out of it as a rider. So I started using the HRV for training app every morning, taking an HRV reading since mid-October, and it just hasn't given me anything useful. I really wanted it to be useful.
I want this to work. I
want it. So there's two things. Firstly, the sensitivity of the reading is quite hard to get accurate. So it needs to be taken when you first wake up. You have to go to the toilet before, so go to a pee, come back to bed. You can't take the reading lying down. You have to be sitting up, and you can't check your phone. Like, you can't do anything that stimulates you. So even just to get the accurate data is hard. Like, the data you get off a Whoop strap during the day is not consistent enough. So you do the morning reading, and even if you do that, which I've been pretty good at doing, it's never really, there was a few of those rides we did where it says my HRV was low, so I listened to it, but I still don't know why. I still can't link that to anything of why it was low. And I still don't know what would have happened if I had done the hard workout on the day it said I should rest. When I got sick, it showed that I was sick, but I already knew I was sick, so that wasn't that useful. And then there was days where I was tired, and it said I was okay. It's just, yeah.
But, and ultimately, I think at the end, like you knew what was coming. Like you knew race day was coming, and it was getting to a point where, you know, if you'd woke up that day, did the test, and it told you you were in the red or something, like, well, now what? Like,
well, on race day, it's more of a training tool. Like if I was low like the 3 days into the race, but I think pretty much that's because I was so anxious. Every time my heart rate was so high because I was just nervous for it. But like as a coach, the dream is you have this objective tool that tells you how fatigued and under stress an athlete is without having to like take into account their personal kind of opinions on it, the subjective opinions on it, and just have it sort of automated so it's there. I just haven't seen it. It's just not been for me. Hasn't given me enough insight that I can use it, which is kind of a shame because
it's not there yet. Are you guys trying HRV? Have you tried the Garmin suggested training? Let us know. Have you got fitter as your threshold's going? All right, let us know down below. All right, guys, super stuff. That is it for this week. Make sure to check out the links to the previous episodes down below and the podcast. Make sure to go and rate us. We hear that as a thing that you should do on podcast players. All right, guys, we will see you super soon.